You came to this presentation or you came because lunch was included, but I'm grateful that you came anyway. I am looking forward to telling you about what I learned about myself mostly during sabbatical, but also some of the backstory and some of the benefit I hope to you in this experience. Let me start by giving some background, Andy, about how this came about. The Lilly Endowment is the largest fund for religion in America that there is. I don't know what their corpus is, but this is actually from Lilly Pharmaceutical family that made an endowment for Christianity funded things. There's and then they've got a division for arts and for something else. But the Lilly Endowment gives money generously all over the country to help ministry and local churches. But part of their model is they want, and it's interesting because it's kind of like a pharmaceutical model. They try to figure out what works. They do testing and they do all kinds of data gathering to figure out what the problems are for religion in America and what the answers are. And years ago, one of the things that they wanted to address was pastoral burnout. More than 50% of the pastors in America do not retire as pastors. The average tenure for a pastor in America is somewhere between 2 and 3 years. So the burnout situation was pretty critical, and Lilly wanted to put their funds toward helping that. So the Lilly Endowment put out a huge amount of money every year for people to apply. It's highly competitive for people to apply for a grant for a sabbatical leave for pastors. Well, 3 years ago, I asked the personnel committee to be able to apply for one of those grants, that I might be away for that season of renewal. They authorized that. I went through a lot of work putting that grant process together, only to be denied. I told you it's highly competitive. I was, of course, disappointed when one of the members of this church said, I am convinced you need that break, and I'm going to pay for it. And she put into the accounts at the church the money for this sabbatical leave to happen. And so it happened at no expense to Melissa or me, and no expense to the church. It was her generosity that sponsored this time away. But it was also the personnel committee and your generosity that allowed for the time away, 2 months of renewal. Now, the reason I have this other little picture up here is that this was supposed to have happened 2 years ago. It didn't. The rhythms of sabbatical that Lilly has authorized is on the biblical rhythm of 7 days of rest, 7 years of rest, that after 7 years you could apply for sabbatical leave. So after 7 years as pastor, I made that application, all of that, but it shut down. So that money was waiting. Melissa and I waited 2 years until the world opened up a little bit, and we were able to take this trip. Let me tell you some of where we went and what we did, Andy. Yeah. Well, first, let me say a little more about sabbatical rest while you read this fable, this familiar fable from Stephen Covey's book. But the pastoral burnout numbers were at an epidemic level, and the truth is they have gotten worse. COVID has accelerated pastoral retirements and pastoral leaves. in a way that's created somewhat of a pastoral crisis. There are more churches open right now, Baptist churches in our part of the tradition, than there are folks to go fill them. And so I've debated how much of this to tell you, but I don't want this to sound pity, but I also want to be authentic with you all. I was at a rough place before sabbatical. Partly because, the work is demanding. I knew that when I got into it. But what COVID did is it did all the stuff you saw on Facebook, right? All of that got worked out in church. I got calls from the left and the right complaining about masks. I got calls from the left and the right complaining about my approach to the racial strife in our country, that I had said too much, I had said too little. The demands, it was coming pretty hard. I had one church member take me on Facebook and called me a heretic, and what was the other word? An apostate. I had to look that one up. That meant I just left the faith altogether. And he said on Facebook that he was leaving the church, but before he did, he was going to take me down. Now, I can handle that, but I was not getting the parts of pastoral work that renew me. So what I love about this work is being a part of your lives, that I get to sit in hospital rooms. I couldn't for 2 years. That I could go to your home and have a cup of coffee, and I couldn't for 2 years. That I could go to lunch with you and find out what's going on in your life and what's important to you, and I couldn't for 2 years. So when the parts that drain ministry ratcheted up and the parts that refill were gone, I was at a pretty bad place. So the timing of this was just remarkable. The hardest part I'm going to talk about later in this presentation, but I want to set that up. Like, I'm not going to say any more about it, except to say this was a gift you gave me that might have saved my ministry. So, next slide. We were 2 months total, 5 weeks in Europe, 40 days in Europe, and does that not look like a whirlwind? It was magical, but it was a lot. Melissa and I had never been to Europe before, so we kind of committed to seeing every European city in 5 weeks, and that was kind of challenging. 3 of those weeks were back here domestic and included a week of family vacation. You all know that I go with my dad, my sisters, their families. My dad is in town today, and his wife Laura are sitting at this middle table. They're here for the presentation and to see about our trip too. But so I went on family vacation with my sisters and nieces, and all of that was a part of the 2 months away. But right now, I'm going to focus on the 5 weeks, the magical 5 weeks we spent in Europe. We walked 197 miles in 5 weeks. Melissa tried to kill me. I looked it up. We could have walked from here to Asheville in the miles we put together. It's 197 miles from here to Asheville. We averaged right at 5 miles a day, but keep in mind part of this was a cruise where we just sat, we walked no miles, right? Part of this was Mykonos, where we sat by the pool every day, and the longest walk we made was from the room to the pool. So Averaging 5 miles a day is a lot of walking. Andy. Yeah. Yeah. Somehow, even with that much walking, I managed to gain 6 pounds because of that. We also ate ourselves, Andy, all over Europe. See, that was not. I'll assure you, that was not the only gelato that we. So, I've got work to do now that I'm back. One of the challenges, 5 weeks in Europe, is you can't pack for 5 weeks in Europe. So you can take one piece of luggage to check and one carry-on bag. And so on 2 occasions, we found laundromats and were able to wash. But on more occasions, do you see this picture on the right? That's our clothes hanging in hanging in our room. Melissa bought these little sheets at the mall that you can put in the sink and froth it up and we washed our clothes in the sink and hung them. We were out on the street and I turned around and took a picture of her dress and my pants hanging to dry. That was one of the challenges of 5. Talk some, mostly this was rest, but I want to talk some about some work-related highlights here. The top left picture is Janae Angel. Y'all know that we entered into a relationship with the missionary in Belgium, and we have for about 3 years, about the start of COVID time, so we'd never met Janae. Lots of Zoom meetings, and she was a part of Vacation Bible School one year. But Melissa and I took the train from Amsterdam to Antwerp to spend the day with Janae, and that's her and me pictured in the left, and she is doing a wonderful work with refugees in Antwerp. Below is Mike Piers. The Cooperative Baptist Fellowship supports a seminary in Antwerp, an international seminary, and Mike is president of that seminary, and he made time for us, and that's the library we're standing in there. Of course, a highlight was seeing some of the most famous religious art in the world. In every city, we saw breathtaking and moving pieces of art. But because of our relationship to the Catholic Church next door, I had a particular highlight. Through connections and friendships there, we were introduced to Father Frias, I'm pictured with right here. And Father Frias works at the Vatican and made arrangements for us to sit particularly close. I'll show you in another picture. We are up, if you've been to the Vatican, you know, there's that massive St. Peter's Square, and then steps that go up to St. Peter's Basilica. And the Pope's weekly audience, he comes out, and there were thousands out there, and Father Frias had arranged seating for us from me to Lee Perkins, away from the Pope. I mean, it was just a remarkable. I'm not making any parallels to Lee Perkins and the Pope. Let's be clear. Let's be real clear about that. But it was just a really moving experience for us to be a part of that as well. We had one of the fun parts of travel is you meet people you may never see again. And engage in some part of their life story. I told you about Father Frias. That's me in the bottom left with a woman who helped us figure out the laundromat. Yeah. That's Melissa with a guy. We were with this guy and his fiance on the train to somewhere, and just had the richest conversation about international affairs and all of that. It was just great. Our tour guide in the middle of our golf cart tour in Rome. Upper right was the woman who helped us figure out the train to get back from Antwerp. We had no idea how to get back from Antwerp. She was seated behind us after she got us on there, and I popped back there for a picture. The guy in the lower right, uh, there was a big party in Amsterdam. We were there for King's Day, a national holiday. The home of Heineken Beer throws a big party, as it turns out, and this guy was not that unusual at the party. But Melissa got pictured with him as a part of that festivity. But part of the fun of travel was just meeting these people we know we'll never see again, but they helped us out. They were a part of that story, and that was a lot of fun. But as I've also alluded to, a wonderful part of the trip was to build relationships with professional ministry folks who will be an ongoing part of our ministry here. We'll be back in touch with Mike Piers at the seminary, and Janae's work we've already committed to, but to have spent the day with her, building relationship, eating lunch, all of that, is important beyond the Zoom meetings that we have. But here was the most important relational part of it for me. I've got to tell you the story of both of these pictures. So the guy in the top picture in the back is a professor at Palm Beach Atlantic College. He teaches church history. And he's a friend. I used to call on PBA when I was at the seminary. He became a friend. We became golf buddies. My dad and I started sponsoring a golf weekend 25 years ago, a little tournament in South Carolina. I invited him to come along, and he'd been a part of that golf outing. The guy in the front, Sam Harris, is one of my closest friends from high school. Sam also became a part of that golf tournament, and Sam and Gary Poe had no relationship apart from that tournament until Sam found out that Gary Poe took a group of students every 2 years to Europe, and Sam said, I want to tag along. So for years, every 2 years, Sam has been tagging along with Gary Poe, going to Europe to hear from a church historian about the sites he's taking his class to. I found out that Gary was going to be in Rome at the exact same time I was going to be at Rome. So I got to renew this wonderful friendship with two of my long-standing friends in Rome. So when we got to a Bernini fountain, Sam Harris said, we need to document this, and that's what that picture is. The picture below is, she was Denise Burton, and she now has a long Greek name I can't pronounce well. Denise was my elementary school crush, and I would go around the corner and sit on the curb at her house, and she reminded me that when I picked her up to go to high school, I charged everybody I picked up $1 a week for gas, and that embarrassed me because what a cheapskate. Denise lives, she married a Greek man. She lives in Athens, so when we were in Athens, we connected with them, went out to dinner, told stories of childhood. It was just delightful. So the interesting part of the reason I'm bringing all this up is that traveled, halfway around the world, and the relational part that was the most significant to me was the reconnecting with people who live in Atlanta and West Palm Beach, or who lived around the corner from me in Doraville. And this will loop back at the end about some of what I've learned as a part of this trip. So here, let me set up the bonus picture. I started rummaging through the pictures on my computer, trying to find a picture of Sam Harris or Gary Poe from way back to show y'all the length of this relationship. Well, I didn't find one. That's not going to be it. What I did find is a picture that has absolutely nothing to do with my sabbatical, but it has something to do with this church. So I threw it in there. It's a bonus. It will not cost you any extra. It's just going to be in the presentation. Before I show you the picture, let me tell you the story. Melissa and I were married June 1984 at First Baptist Church, Doraville. I had just finished college. A group from Mercer came to my wedding at Doraville, and we took a picture of the folks from Mercer who had come to the wedding. I ran across this picture looking for what I told you I was looking for, and recognized that in this picture there are 5 people who grew up at Second-Ponce, who were classmates of mine at Mercer. Most of y'all won't know these 5 people, but some of you will, so I'm going to show you a picture of some of the folks who came to my wedding. On the bottom, second from the left, is Jim Watterson. Steve Suggs is in the back row, if you see him. Not Tom Neal. Frank Neal has his head poking behind Danny Downing right there. Frank Neal was not invited to my wedding. He just showed up and stuck his head in. Danny Downing and Mark Crumpler in the tuxedos, 5 people at my wedding who grew up in this church. So I thought that was fun. All right, let's get back to my sabbatical. No more of that. All right. The 3 biggest takeaways and biggest gifts of this sabbatical to me, we can hit all 3 of them, was that Melissa and I had time to reconnect. It improved my perspective, and it did give me renewal. I'm going to talk through some slides around each of those, but and we can go to the one with Melissa. You know, some of you who've been married a long time might have a sense of this. Melissa and I were not in any perilous place in our marriage, but the most significant conversation we'd had in months was, don't put that plate in the dishwasher, those dishes are clean. I mean, y'all know what I mean. And we spent every minute of every day for 40 days. Some of you are praying for her at this moment. I know that, oh gosh, she did what? But the space for us to talk about things that matter, relationships, the children, the grandchildren, where do you want to live in retirement? The big stuff, right? Was the best gift of sabbatical, which I hope will in turn be a good gift to you. And isn't my traveling companion cute? We got to remember why we fell in love with each other, which was a wonderful, wonderful outcome of this time together. The second takeaway was perspective. The 3 pictures of art I put in there as a reminder that what we're doing here every week, bulletins and newsletters, is a part of a much bigger redemptive story. For all of these years of history, God has been at work reclaiming the world. And the things that endure are truly great pieces of art like this that are in museums. But the other thing that endures are relationships. It's the reason I put this friendship picture back in the corner. So much of what we do here, it's all important, it all matters. We do church in good and sloppy ways, but what endures is how well we bear witness to the love of God in Christ, and lives get changed, and the relationships that we form here. I have a new kind of commitment that I want everybody in this room's best friend to be somebody else in this room. That we've created the kind of place where the things that matter are what we focus on here. And the things that matter are the enduring parts of the gospel and the enduring nature of relationships that mean something. The third outcome, takeaway, and wonder of this is exactly at the heart of its intent, which is relaxation and renewal. I did unplug. I did feel myself again. I felt relaxed again. Some of you know that I had an issue in my neck that was really interfering with life for me. I stopped playing golf in the middle of February. I had pain shooting down my arm all the time, looking at a possible surgery, and it may still be a possible surgery. I've seen the MRIs. I have something going on in my neck that's real. But a week into this sabbatical, I had no more pain in my neck and arm, which tells me that part of what was going on is what I was carrying, right? Like I said, there's something in there. I may still have to have surgery, but I really did get to relax, get to experience the Sabbath nature of this time away, and the sabbatical part of what you allowed for me came true for me. So that bottom right picture might be my favorite picture of the whole time away. That was into about, I think we were in week 4 in that picture. And I felt as relaxed as I look in that one. So this has been the most asked question since we have been back. You saw that list of cities we went to. What was your favorite place? Before I reveal, I want to tell you that I asked Melissa this form of this question 3 times since we've been back. But what I said was, of the cities, not all the little cities on the cruise, but of the cities where we stayed a while, rank them in order. There were 6. I asked her 3 times. I got 3 different answers. So our love of it was always the place we were at the time. It was just wonderful. But if pushed, my favorite place would be Rome. The religious art and history of that place, the pasta, and the religious art and history, I would go back to Rome in a minute. Melissa's favorite place, I think, if you pushed her, was Mykonos, where she looked at blue water and read books and relaxed. So let me talk some about what all this, I think, means for the church, our church here. First, it did what it intended. I'm rested. I'm ready to get back in the game. I'm ready to go. And as I mentioned to you before, that's not the place I was when I left. I was spent, and I'm ready to jump back in with you and go and do. And that is, I hope you think, a wonderful benefit of your investment of these 2 months for me to be away. I have also committed to be more focused on the enduring parts of this work. When I got away from it and the urgency of everything, and thought about how much of my week is just work and how much of my week is involved in something that really does endure, It made me want to come back and invest more in the relationships that are in this room and beyond. I also need to say here that none of the relaxation could have happened apart from Lynn Rose and John Aldrich and the rest of this staff. Because, well, I'll also put Matt Duvall in that group and his terrific preaching. But a part of the reason I was able to drop back is I knew this place was in good hands. John was running this ministry, and it didn't miss a lick, and I really did trust that this ministry was moving forward. Coming back, I'm going to try to continue to trust that and free myself to do more of the relational work that's life-giving to me and that I think is the most enduring part of the work. So I gave you a teaser at the beginning that I had not yet mentioned the most stressful part of this job. I'm going to confess the most stressful part of this job. It is giving leadership to a declining institution. That the church in America has been in decline for 30 years, and until God brings revival, those indicators are still present. And I continue to pray with you that revival happens across America and in this church. But what I realized I had embodied was the pressure to fix it. And that, well, and some of you told me, it's your job to fix it. You have to turn this around. And so counting every week and anxious every week about it was crushing me. And part of the perspective I gained was the recognition that my job is to be faithful, not successful, right? As I keep saying to the staff, all we can do is make good swings at good pitches. Right? After that, we don't know. It is in God's hands. And so part of what I have learned and part of what I'll ask you to help keep me accountable about is that I need to delight in this work again and do the part, invest in you all, and trust that the outcomes are not my job. Fidelity to the calling is my job, and God will be responsible for the outcomes. That we will continue to focus on our mission together, to grow in Christ and community, sharing God's love in the world. And all of us commit to doing that together, every day, apart and together. And we're going to leave the rest of that to God to take care of. We will make good swings at good pitches. Finally, the Michelangelo sculpture that is here I kept coming back to. The Pieta is, if you walk into St. Peter's Basilica, it is the first thing on the right. And so working our way through there, we walked in and walked over and stared at this for a while. After we had toured all through and all over, I came back and stood and stared again. I think there might have been a picture in here of Father Frias and me back at the Pieta. I was continued to be drawn to this. And here's the reason. Here's the message in this for me. As it relates to this giving up the stress, this is Mary's most difficult hour. She's holding her son, having come down from the cross, and there is no worse time for a parent. And yet, in the most difficult, most stressful, hardest hour of her life, in this depiction by Michelangelo, notice that her face is not in anguish. Her face is at peace, which says she believes in the resurrection. So we'll do the work together, go through hard times together, delight together. We will be a part of each other's lives. Some days will be anguishing. I'm ready to go back. But I'm hoping I can do this next chapter of ministry with you with that look on my face. Our prayer at nearly every meal there was, thanks be to God, and we called out the woman's name who gave, and to the woman who gave that money. But I need to extend that thanks to you all. I mean, without, this is not a given for every church and every pastor. So thank you. You let me go get renewed. And as I said, I'm back. I'm ready to go. Let's work hard. But more than that, more than working hard, let's get in each other's lives in different ways with a different texture, so that this place, not just the building, not just the sanctuary, not just the holy parts of our connection to God matters, but that this place matters because we know we matter when we're in this place, that we're connected to people in a way we're not connected anywhere else apart from family. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support, and go in peace.